Today we have two very important topics. One is the targeted neonatal neurological examination by Kunji sir, and the next is rabies prevention, dilemmas and solutions by our own Shija madam, and Dr. Riaz, National Executive Board member IAP, as the moderator. Before going to the academic program, I invite PMC sir, President NNF Trivandrum, for a welcome address.
Okay, thank you, Praveen. Anyway, actually, both the speakers are so well known that there is no need for a welcome introduction. You know, Dr. Mohammed Kunju, I am sure none of you need any introduction for him. He is, but one point, as he is always a man of innovations, and I am also eager to hear what he is going to say about targeted neonatal neurological examination. And Shija Suganan, she is a gifted lady. You don't have to explain more about her. So I welcome all of you, especially the audience. Getting the audience is a big thing nowadays because there are so many programs anyway. So welcome all of you, audience first, and then the speakers. Thank you, Riaz. Thank you, Praveen.
Thank you, sir. And now over to Riaz sir for the academic program.
Thank you, Praveen, for the opportunity. Because when Kunji sir and Shija is speaking, being the moderator itself is an honor. And regarding neurological examination of the newborn, examination of newborn itself is very difficult to find out the neurological abnormalities in a newborn. For us, it is very maybe perplexing. But we all know, because most of us who are here in this meeting very well know that how Kunji sir elicits neurological signs. Because many signs which do not appear to us will reveal themselves when Kunji sir is around. All of us have seen that during our rounds and classes. I still remember when I was a PG, I was presenting a newborn with the myelomeningocele, and the reflexes and all, how well he elicited. Long years have passed, but still I remember the class. So for introducing Kunji sir also, it will be an excess if I try to introduce him among you. He is a gifted teacher and a great human being. That is what I want to tell about him. So without wasting much time, I invite sir for the talk. Over to Kunji sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, PMC and Riaz, for the nice words and the good introduction. I think I'll start the presentations. First of all, I must say I'm very much delighted to present this topic because PMC is there and Riaz is there. All of you know that we together were President and Secretary in Trivandrum IAP, as well as in Kerala IAP. And because without much difficulty, I can say that that is one of the best years of IAP Trivandrum and IAP Kerala, and both Trivandrum as well as IAP Kerala definitely has got a increased momentum by involving a lot of youngsters to the IAP forum. Today, even though the newborn week is just over, I am just carrying over that week observation by doing my bit of neonatal neurological examination. So here, again, as PMC said, because nowadays when we are all doing a neurologic or a clinical examination, most of the time we get the investigations and then you go for an examination to usually collaborate the findings that you may be seeing by the investigations. And again, because of that, in usual situations, we will not be doing a complete new examination in any of the systems. because we have X-ray chest for chest or pulmonary problems. We have the echocardiogram for a cardiological problem, ultrasound for the abdominal problem. So most of the time, it is only symptoms that leads us to investigation, and then only we may go for some sort of testing. And most of the time, in the neurology also, because the cranial nerve examination, motor system examination, etc., will be asked only during the examination, the usual board examinations or the final examination, not even during the rounds. Many will be asking these things. So because of all these things, when you are encountering a problem, we'll be going for a targeted examination. That is the best. So I think when I was just going for this, because I was delighted by the story of Dronacharya and Arjuna, where because everybody was envious about Arjuna, and Drona wanted to prove why Arjuna is his pet student, and he brought everybody out, and a model of a bird was hanged in the tree, and he asked everybody else to describe what they are seeing before aiming, and everybody was describing that I am seeing a tree, leaves, branches, and a bird. And even the Drona's son didn't know what is the expectations of Drona. And finally, when the Arjuna was asked, he just told that I am seeing only one thing, and that is the eye of the bird. So that is what I think in an examination also nowadays we must be doing. That so the examination also we must be aiming at the target. So if you miss the target, then I think you will miss everything. And that is what is important in our life also. When you want to achieve something, you must focus on it, close out all other distractions and concentrate only on your target. So that should be our method of examination in a newborn also, because even though newborn is very tiny, we can't do a complete systematic protocol-based examination. So we must be doing a targeted examination. So this examination starts in the newborn, because when we are approached, because they will not be coming to you, you have to approach them. And from the very beginning itself, a higher mental function examination can be done by just observing the baby. So a higher mental function examination can be done in a newborn also. And the stages of the alertness or the consciousness can be divided into different stages. A quiet sleep that is equivalent to the NREM sleep, then the active sleep, drowsiness, alert and quiet, alert and active, active and cry. So we have to identify the stages, observe the evolution of the arousal. That will give you the clue about the activity of the baby and the sensorium. And for the newborn assessment, we have a lot of scales. And for a neonatologist, because the most important thing is to assess the gestational age. For a neurologist like me, when I am called or a consultant is asked, because we don't have to do that, just for the higher mental function assessment of the consciousness, we can use the Pratchell scale or the Brazelton scale. In the Pratchell scale, because just like our Glasgow Coma scale, EMV, that is the eye movement or eye opening on then the motor movement, motor activities or gross movements, and vocalization, that is the cry. And then additionally, you observe the respiration. So by this, the stages which I have described can be assessed. So EMV is the scale for the Glasgow Coma scale also. And in Brazelton, we have this cry, behavior, habituation, consolability, and cuddliness. So by this, anyway, you can observe the consciousness and assess the babies, as I have mentioned, but it must be the evolution that you must be observing. But I won't be going into, as I have mentioned, won't be going into the usual system examination of the higher mental function. cranial nerve, then the motor system, and sensory system, cerebellar, like that, because you can't do it in most of the situations. So I thought of doing it in a situation based, where a pediatric neurologist or a pediatrician or a neonatologist himself will be encountering each problem. For example, a baby seems to be hypertonic, or there is a tone variation, or in a situation where you want to differentiate whether this baby is having hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy or a non-hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Then once ventilated, when the baby is to be extubated, or what is the status in the post-ventilator status, then non-moving limbs or a non-moving eyes or a non-moving face, and then some clues for early diagnosis of cerebral palsy, and when to start for an oral feeding. And finally, because most of the time when I was in SAT and as well as now in KIMS, I'm asked to give an opinion about the antenatal abnormal neurosonogram. So this, before going into each situations, because when a baby is seen by you, Dr. Harikumar, the late Harikumar, on the first day when I joined for DCH, he showed me how to do a neonatal examination in the quickest manner, and I use that, and this is it. So when newborn is seen, first and foremost must be as much as possible use examine the baby in the undressed position, start from the head downwards, and just you lift so that you have assessed the tone, and undress, and don't forget to examine the genitalia, even in a neurological case, because an undescended testis or abnormal genitalia is very much helpful to make a diagnosis. And then you lift the baby. So don't forget to cover the baby also after undressing, because you have to be modest even with a newborn. And after the covering, just turn the baby and look at the back, so that you won't be, because I have seen even after the discharge from the very respected hospital, the missing of a meningomyelocele, and then just do a axillar hanging reaction and a ventral suspension. So this much quick exam, you would have noticed that it took only 1 minute. So, and then you can observe the movement of the baby also, how the limbs are being moved. Here you can see that. Can anybody tell what this baby is having? Very active baby, but what is the problem? This baby, anybody? Can somebody give an answer here? So you okay. So this baby, definitely you can see that even though the baby is moving the limbs, only the distal part is being moved, the proximal part is not moved, and the lower limb also the movement is less. So by observing this, and even the respiratory movement also, you can see that there is a predominantly abdominal movement, intercostals are weak. So this is a baby with definitely proximal muscle weakness. So most probably this must be having a early onset spinal muscular atrophy or a congenital myopathy because of the proximal weakness. And one must understand that the universal flexion that is seen in the newborn, because the God has positioned the baby inside the uterus by universal flexion, so that the baby will be occupying less space. And this is by the neurological mechanism of a short latency afference. And once in a newborn, in a term baby, the flexion starts from the distal to the proximal part. Even though the development is rostro-caudal, here the flexion, universal flexion of the newborn is happening in a caudorostral manner. And then you can observe for the positioning. This is the universal flexion, that is the normal posture. Then a frog-leg position, hypertonic baby, or a hyperextension position in a spastic baby. Again, the hypertonia, when it is there, see, even in a newborn, when you are keeping the baby in the prone position, definitely there will be some amount of head raising will be there. And in the pull to sitting position also, momentarily the baby will be able to hold the head. But later there will be definitely head lag will be there. And when you are doing the traction response, normal baby will be flexing the legs. But if there is no flexion or there is an extension, think of a stiff extension of the legs and adduction and tiptoeing. Think that the baby is having a hypertonic state and it is going to develop a cerebral palsy. And again, see here, abnormal traction response with a mixture of increased and decreased tone, because the head lags, so that indicates a hypotonia. But but there is a tendencies to pull to stand. This must be definitely suggestive of a central hypotonia than a peripheral hypotonia. But when we are looking the baby in the prone ventral suspension, there are two types of tone. One is the active tone, when in a different positions, what the baby tries to attain the posture, that is the active tone. Or you can assess the other tone and the movement by vertical suspension. Here, here you can see that the baby is falling by the when held on the axilla, and that is hypertonic. But this is a normal tone where you can see that the baby is trying to hold, as well as there will be good flexion movements. And this is some amount of hypertonia where the legs are getting extended. And passive tone can be assessed by the Hamilton angles, but just an adductor angle examination itself will be sufficient to identify whether there is a hypotonia or a hypertonia. And by this, when there is an increased tone or a decreased tone, we can start the early intervention from that time onwards itself by various stimulation processes. And assessing the reflex, see there again, just by eliciting here, because I am having a neonatal knee hammer, I am using to elicit the knee jerk. And see, there is a adductor spread of the knee jerk also. But you can use your index finger for just to elicit the reflex. And here, look at, if the reflex is elicitable, then you know that you are not dealing with a lower motor neuron disease, but definitely it will be an upper motor neuron. If the reflexes are sluggish, or you are finding it difficult to elicit, then definitely it may be a lower motor neuron. So just elicit right. And many times you may understand that, because then elicitation, the reflex will be normally seen in a baby, as well as they may be having even angled clonus also, a newborn may have. And so in such situations, how can you identify whether it is a hyperreflexia or not? So there is one sign, because in this may not be working. This is the heel thrust reflex. So you just dorsiflex the dorsum of the foot and then give a tap on the sole of the foot, and there will be a thrusting forward of the foot, will indicate that there is a heel thrust reflex, and that indicates hyperreflexia. Similarly, the hand wrist reflex also, you tap over the dorsiflex the palm hand and then wrist, and again tap over the palm, there will be a forward thrust. If these two signs are there, the heel thrust reflex or the hand thrust reflex are there, that will indicate that baby is having a hyperreflexia. And a persistent adductor spread, which may be there till 7 months normally itself, but if it is significantly there, again you can identify that it is a. Then because to identify the postural abnormalities or the hyperreflexic state, you may look for the reflexes. Here again, I am not going to deal with all the neonatal reflexes, because it is cumbersome and it is not required, but at least two reflexes, that is, one is the HNR, other is the Moro. Here again, so look at, just turn the head to one side and see what is happening. and asymmetric tonic neck reflux. So if it is persisting, even otherwise, especially the obligatory tonic neck reflux, which is persistent always, even at the age of in the newborn or at 2 months or 3 months, definitely it is abnormal. And if it is persisting beyond 4 months, definitely it is abnormal. So this is a persistent asymmetric tonic neck reflux and a persistent grasp reflux. If it is more than 50% of the time, definitely that is abnormal. So this way you can identify a hypertonic baby from a hypertonic baby. And as I have mentioned, just by eliciting the jerk, and if the jerk is absent, then you may think of a hypertonic, that means peripheral hypertonia, and hyperreflexic signs are there, you think of a hypertonic or a central hypertonia. The next situation is when you have to identify whether one is having an early evidence of a hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, especially when you have resuscitated and you want to know whether the baby is having a normal situation or a hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Here again, your aim must be to identify the HIE in the early phase or in the stage 1 itself, because stage 2 and stage 3 anybody can diagnose. So what is the single most sign? 2 things, as I have mentioned, and hyper alertness and hypotonia. These 2 things are there. That is this is the Sarnat and Sarnat's classification, where again the mild ones is the irritability and hypotonia. So hyper alert, hypotonia, where hypotonia by head lag, and then look at the hyper alert signs. So eyes will be wide open. There will be a staring look, down rolling of the eyeballs, exaggerated startle reflex, and hyperactive low threshold jitteriness. When these signs are there, like, so eyes will be wide open, staring look, down rolling of eyeballs, exaggerated startle reflex, hyperactive low threshold jitteriness. If these signs are there, think of a early onset of hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy and be alert. And now we know that we have the NICHD, National Institute of Child Health and Developmental Neurology Institute of Kennedy Institute. They have given an elaborate scoring system for identifying hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. This again based on the Sarnat and Sarnat's classification. But as I have mentioned, only just by looking at the early phase, and then by looking for whether there is a seizure is present and the sensorium, you can easily differentiate a mild, moderate, and severe hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Then the third situation would be to differentiate whether it is a hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy or whether it is the encephalopathy is a non-hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy like inborn error of metabolism, or whether it is the altered sensorium or encephalopathic feature is due to meningitis or encephalitis. This again, we must all remember that hypoxic HIE, usually it will be associated with high risk factors, because never the baby will be neurologically normal on the first or second day. But in an IEM, definitely the baby will be normal around the first 2 days. We know that because of the protein feeding. Only very rarely, like glycine encephalopathy, the intrauterine presentation will occur. Otherwise, most of the time, baby will be somewhat normal till 2 days, and then worsens with a drowsiness, seizure, or even increase in trachea pressure. I think you all will be aware of my mnemonic of AEIOU. Any sort of acute encephalopathic process, AE, acute AES, you know that acute encephalitis syndrome. AEIOU can be remembered. A for asphyxia, E for epilepsy or seizures, even in the newborn, and infections and other infectious processes. O for opium or outside, because if mother have consumed either an opium, or she is addicted to drug, or she is on anticonvulsants or other drugs, and uremia or internal toxins. Okay, uremia or internal toxins can be an acquired metabolic abnormalities like hypoglycemia, hypocalcemia, hyponatremia. So remember this. So, and you can identify the conditions. So in IEM, you will be having other manifestations like a family history of a sibling loss or a consanguinity, and again, a past history of sudden death in previous deliveries. And how will you identify meningitis or encephalitis? Because here again, you can look for other evidences of a sepsis. And usually at the end of the first week or the second week, even herpes simplex encephalitis, when genital infection happens, there will be some time for the development. So, and other system involvement. So when these are there, but definitely you may have difficulty because HIE may be associated with meningitis, or IEM also may be precipitated by a sepsis like that. But this dictum may be somewhat useful to differentiate these conditions. And then coming to the most important neurological problem, because when to start oral feeding, because especially when there is an oromotor hypotonia, there is drooling of a saliva or a swallowing difficulties, you want to know whether in a preterm baby, because if you are starting at the premature feeding, definitely the aspiration may be a problem. In such situations, you have to identify whether there is a severe oromotor hypotonia is there. And in that case, you know that it can be part because of a neuromuscular disorder, as in this case. So by again a targeted examination, the baby, you may not find the diagnosis. You may have to examine the mother. So this baby who was having a hypotonia, ventilator dependency, then the examination, the mother gave the diagnosis, that is, mother was having a myotonia dystrophica. But again, you may not get finding like a severe congenital or a myopathic facies like this in a mother who is having a myotonia dystrophy. It will be subtle finding. So you have to examine the mother, just tap the mother's hand to look for any myotonia, and hooray, you have the diagnosis. But the other situations also, because baby may have a oromotor hypotonia, even in a preterm baby who is recovering. And so in such situations, you can identify the oromotor hypotonia by looking at the inverted V-shaped upper lips, look at the inverted V-shaped upper lips, pouting lower lip, and open mouth, the pooling of saliva, see the upturned nostril, wide philtrum, expressionless face, suprasternal indrawing. See, all these may be seen in an immature baby. So even if you think that the baby is alert, the baby is active, but still, if this is if you are having a looking for an oromotor hypotonia, then you don't start on feed. The baby has to be supported further, and once these symptoms improve, only you can go for an oral feeding. And then the next situation would be to a baby who is presenting with the non-moving limbs or a non-moving face. Here again, examination by, so if the baby is crying, then you know that because in this case, the eyes are open on this side, there is no wrinkling of the eyes, the forehead, and there is a deviation. Definitely this must be a facial palsy. Then ask for a history of a forceps delivery, or look at the ear for any ear deformities, because many times there may be an anotia. And again, if the baby is not crying, as in this case, you may not see anything. But once the baby start crying, you will see the abnormality. This can be either a facial palsy, or it may be something as you are seeing in this child. See the baby in the resting stage, nothing is there. But when the baby is crying, you see there is a facial deviation. But in this case, look at the eyes. There is no eye opening. There is no problem with the forehead. So this may be a case of a congenital hypoplasia of depressor anguli oris. Again, so that means just like cry is good. So crying baby will give a lot of clues for your examination. But again, when a child having an eye movement abnormality, see in this case, you are seeing the eye movement. That means both the eyes are converging. So then look at the other movements, especially see, look at the facial movement, and you can see that in this case, there is no facial movement at all. So here, identify that. So when there is a facial eye movements are inward, means there may not be a movement outside. That means the eye is not moving out. So there is a lateral rectus palsy. So when there is lateral rectus palsy is there, because sixth nerve along with that seventh nerve also may be affected. So don't miss a seventh nerve palsy, because here there is a mask-like facies, expressionless, unable to close the eyes. So corneal ulcerations, because it has happened later only. So with this, you may make a diagnosis of Mobius syndrome. So that means looking at the other evidences. Then you can look at just test the face by a reverse of a needle and look for the fifth nerve manifestations also in that situation. And then comes a referral for a non-moving limb. Okay, so you have to identify whether it is a Erb's palsy or not. So Erb's palsy, all of us are aware that is the policeman skips position or the waiter skip position. That is easier. So here, identify that right side the baby's arm is flexing, but on the left side it is extended. See here, extended, and there is no flexion happening here. So even the elbow is not flexing, means something which is preventing the flexion. So the child is keeping the hand extended, and so look for that movement. And along with that, you have to look for another thing, that the finger, the grasp reflex. Okay, grasping. So here you can see that the baby. So what are the abnormalities you expect? Because when there is the Erb's palsy is there, because you know that it is kept in the waiter's skip position, means the arm will be adducted. So abduction will be weak. And because the arm is extended, so the flexion will be weak, and it is pronated. So you know that the pronation is weak. So you can't supinate. So that means pronation is powerful. So supination is weak, and then arm is kept in a flexed position. So the extensors are weak, and the wrist is flexed. So wrist extensors are weak. So these are the muscles that are affected. So coolly, when you are seeing a child with a Erb's palsy, the PG student can say that, sir, there is weakness of the wrist extensors, there is weakness of the supinators, there is weakness of the flexors of elbow, and there is weakness of abduction. So you look for these signs for the improvement also. But again, one point that you have to look in this situation, so the flexion of the elbow, and then make the child grasp your finger. So when the primary grasp is there, look for the encircling and the clinging. See whether when you are pulling out. So if this is there, then you know that it is an Erb's palsy. But when that is also weak, so you have to identify whether it is a complete brachial plexus palsy or not. Because when the grasp is also not there, finger flexion is not there, and the limb is in a weak state, it may be a complete brachial plexus palsy rather than a Erb's palsy. And then you have to look for two more things, that there will be a small area of hypoesthesia around the shoulder, because the lesion is at C5-6. And then you should not be forgetting to look for a diaphragmatic paralysis. So look for ask for an X-ray abdomen. Look at the subcostal angle when there is an asymmetry, because most of the time it will be the right diaphragm that will be elevated, especially if it is too intercostal space above the left diaphragm. If there may be a diaphragmatic paralysis, so phrenic nerve also may be affected along with that. So this will lead to respiratory compromise, especially when there is associated slight hypoxia also. And so that means if there is a wrist weakness also, plus finger weakness, think of a complete brachial plexus palsy. And don't forget to palpate the shoulder, the clavicle. I'll be coming to that. Before that, I'll just try to differentiate a Klumpke's from Ebb's pulse. So here again, when you are thinking of a weakness of a finger drop, or like a clawing in a newborn, think of a Klumpke's paralysis. This can happen because of the upward force on an arm, or grabbing a tree branch, tearing of a lower trunk, that is CAT1. So total clawing of the hand may be there. And the mnemonic to remember the Klumpke is to Klumpke palsy, you have a clawing, and the paralysis is because of a pulling of the arm, that is the climbing tree in a forceful manner. So this is the finger drop. And in the Ebb's palsy, how do you do? Because it is a lateral traction of the neck, because when the head is pulled out, the shoulder, when there is a shoulder dystocia is there, that tears the upper trunk, that is a C5-6. That is why the abduction paralysis, elbow flexion paralysis, and the wrist extension paralysis. So that is the waiter's tip. And again, as I have told you, when you have to look for a certain associated clavicular fracture also. So don't miss. So just palpate the clavicle and you'll get that clue. And when there is a abnormal modeling of the arm also, here you see, in addition to the flexion deficit, you see the upper arm is having a modeling deficit also, and the baby was having a fracture femur. I think this, see, in 2019 from the SAT hospital. Okay, so that is it. So identifying this, looking at these signs, then you will be able to just identify the weakness, by where is the weakness and where is the abnormality. Similarly, when a baby is seen in this manner, because the neonatology PG told me, sir, this child is having a huge meningomyelocele, but the baby is not having any neurological deficit. And but then I demonstrated the findings to him, saying that you just lift the child like this, and the baby is keeping the legs in a flexed manner. We all think that this is the universal flexion, but in this case, at least some amount of extension must happen at the hip. But here, no extension means the extensors are weak, and the leg is kept in the extended position here. So the knee flexors are weak. And here the dorsiflexors are there, so the plantar flexors are weak. So that means here the L1 is paired, L2 is paired, L3 is paired. So the lesion is below L1-2. That is, the lesion is only at the L5. So L4-5 is affected, L1-2-3 is paired. So that means the lesion, that is why the child is not having the extension is defective, but that is not appreciated. And again, I must say that, see, the importance, see, this child, when the students were presenting, they were presenting this case as the child developed the weakness of the lower limbs and incontinence of urine and motion after a surgery. Okay. Because if the weakness is not noticed properly, can anybody tell what this child is having here? See, there is a good hand movement is there. He is clapping at 7 months itself. See, but when you can see that both the legs are flabby, and only the right lower limb, some amount of flexion is happening. All other movements are defective. And this was the surgery done. So our aim as a neonatologist, as a pediatricians, is to counsel the parents regarding the probable abnormalities that can happen when a child is having a myelomeningocele. What are the because the weakness may not be noticed. The newborn will their incontinence of the passing of urine without the knowledge will not be recognized till 1.5 years, because when the bladder control happens only by 1.5 years. So till then, people will not recognize the bladder abnormality. Later, they will blame the doctors by saying that it is because of the surgery, all these things have happened. So identifying the abnormality, find out the abnormalities, and tell what are the possibilities the baby is going to happen. And again, unnecessary investigation also can be avoided if you know the exact abnormality. So here you see this baby had a pilonidal sinus or just a coccygeal pit. So this is a small coccygeal pit, and an MRI was ordered. But such a thing is not at all required, because if the coccygeal pit is there, especially this pit is 2.5 millimeter, 25 millimeter above the anal verge, then only you need to investigate, because any pit below 25 millimeter, that means towards the anal verge, then there is no need for investigation. But investigation should be done when the baby is having an abnormalities like this, like an hemangioma, or say for example, even a capillary hemangioma like this, or a tuft of hair, or a tail, human tail, or a lipomatous abnormality, lipomeningocele like this, then definitely the baby has to be investigated. Finally, before concluding, I must say certain clues for identifying early diagnosis of cerebral palsy. I think many of you will be aware of this slide. So, but again, the soft behavioral symptoms like a colicky behavior, feeding problem, after excluding the common problems like an urinary tract infection or abdominal problems, and failure to establish breastfeeding itself may be a pointer for a developing cerebral palsy in a baby who had high risk factors. And if there is a failure to establish a sleep pattern or an irregular sleep pattern, excessive lethargy or excessive irritability, high-pitched cry, poor head control, weak suck, and apnea beyond term. You know that in a preterm baby, apnea can be there, but apnea beyond term, again, you must be thinking of oral hypersensitivity and other things also I have mentioned. So decreased spontaneous mobility, increased abnormal movement, seizures, fisting after 2 months, I told you. And fisting more than 50% of time, even in the newborn period, is definitely abnormal. And abnormal breathing pattern, tongue thrusting movement, as we can see here. By just looking at the abnormal respiration and tongue thrusting sign, we were able to make a diagnosis of Joubert syndrome in this case. Okay, and finally, just palpate the head and pull at the, so this is a sign of a brain atrophy. That again can happen within 2 weeks of birth in a severe case of antenatal hypoxia. And in the finally, an asymmetrical Moro or an asymmetrical reflexes may help you to identify a stroke, neonatal stroke. So then look for the movement of the other limb, and mild asymmetric facial asymmetry may be a clue for a neonatal stroke, and then you have to examine it carefully. And as I have mentioned, the antenatally, when the abnormalities are noticed, you may have to follow up the baby in the newborn phase. And many a times choroid plexus cyst or a megacisterna magna may be a normal finding, but findings like this, where a wedge-shaped schizencephalic defect, then the hemiplegia or a lack of movement of one side may be due to a congenital malformations like schizencephaly. So I think by doing this sort of a targeted examination, finally you can, the PG can present in a systematic manner, but a practitioner, by doing this sort of a targeted examination, will be able to identify each conditions, and you don't have to go for a detailed neurological examination. And by this, I think by taking up some clues, you'll be able to identify hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy to differentiate from other type of encephalopathies, and how to evaluate a hypertonic infant, and how to start feeding, and how to identify the early hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy by looking at the hyper alert state in a hypertonic baby, and how to assess the non-moving limbs to differentiate an upper motor neuron lesion from a lower motor neuron, and early pointers for cerebral palsy, and how to decide on an oral feeding by looking at the neuromotor hypotonia. I think I'll stop here I must thank once again for giving me this opportunity for the IAP as well as the NNF Trivandrum. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Actually, it was like going back to our PG classes time. And I don't find many questions in the chat box. If anyone has a question, please unmute and we can ask. I find many teachers here. If any comments.
Kunju sir,
Sudhir, sir. And the
extend the talk. And thank you for again, as Riaz mentioned.
സാറിനെ കാണുന്നില്ല സാറേ. സാറിനെ കാണാമോ? എനിക്ക് ഇപ്പൊ കാണാം. Okay, sir. Okay.
So, airspace, we are getting almost very good result in majority of cases. But in some cases, we are getting very not very good result. So, what is the role of surgery? Your experience from others?
Surgical because what I have seen is first, if there is only neuropraxia and there is minimal movement, you can just leave it. Otherwise, early starting of steroid has got some benefit, and at least some 50% can improve by oral steroid. Then the surgery, if you are planning, because it is said that up to 3 months you can wait. But by 3 months, if there is no recovery, ideally we have to go for a MRI as well as an EMG study to identify the status of the nerves as well as the root avulsion. And you have to get a good surgeon, either an orthopedic surgeon or a hand surgeon or a plastic surgeon who are well versed in doing a brachial plexus surgery. Definitely by 3 months itself, if surgery can be done, definite improvement can be expected.
Sir, connected with this, there is a question: dose of oral steroids, and what steroid to be used for herbs?
Usually, I go for prednisolone 2 milligram per kg, and you all know that we have to give associate along with that. You give some antacids or other things also, because sometimes even the newborn you can get gastritis. 2 milligram per kg you give for 2 weeks, and depending upon the improvement, if there is improvement, you can taper and stop, or you may go up to 4 weeks.
So another question is how to differentiate brachial plexus injury from monoplegia.
Monoplegia, I told you that because most of the time you will be getting an upper motor neuron signs. And in Ebb's palsy, as I have mentioned, it is the C5, C6. But if it is an upper motor neuron weakness, it is the flexion. The flexion will be there. See, the elbow flexion will be there. If it is an upper motor, that is a pyramidal distribution. So flexion will be there. So extension will be weak. But here, the flexion will be weak because it is C5, 6. That is an important clue. Then you look at that finger flexion reflex and these three, because biceps reflex again will not be elicitable, but triceps will be elicitable in an Ebb's palsy. So that way you can differentiate. Finger flexion reflex will be a very good sign, and then the biceps reflex.
There is one question: what is your experience on complete plexus palsy?
Complete plexus, brachial plexus palsy, it is, you know, that it is a very major involvement. Again, I have seen a number of children improving with mild residual weakness. But again, you have to be cautious giving a problem. Don't tell that you are not going to get improvement at all, but they can get a good improvement also. So as I have told you, you may have tell them that we have to wait till 3 months to identify the improvement, and the possibility of improvement is there till 1 year. But if by 6 months, if there is no improvement, definitely you will have to go for an exploration. That is what is advised.
And regarding the starting day of the steroid, I think it is started immediately, isn't it, sir?
As early as possible, maybe after 1 or 2 days, because first 2 days we can identify whether it may be in that neuropraxic state. So if some improvement is there, then you don't have to give.
And any role for nerve conduction study? I think we'll stop with this because
Yes, the nerve conduction study, as I told you, after 3 months only. Before that, you may not get much, because sometimes it may be even normal. That is another thing, because nerve conduction may not show any abnormality also. After 2 months, when you want to identify the status of the nerve, then you can do it.
Thank you, sir. It was a great lecture, as well as it elicited many discussions, because as the questions also say, Erb's palsy is one very important thing for pediatricians. And I think that part has been cleared without any doubt at all.